Our history is no more than a series of incredible events. Each one of us can influence its course. The tiniest of our decisions can influence the future of mankind. To know the past is to anticipate the future. April 26, 1986, at 1:03 in the morning, engineer Anatoly Dyatlov gives the order to start a test in the Chernobyl nuclear plant. 25 minutes later, firefighters are struggling to extinguish an enormous fire in the very core of the plant's reactor number 4. On May 5, 1986, 3 engineers sacrifice their lives when they dive into radioactive water to prevent the cataclysmic explosion of the plant. These 3 intimately connected events are key moments in one of the most tragic industrial accidents in history, the Chernobyl disaster. Let's see why. Energy, which allows us to move around, to keep warm, to communicate. In our time, control of energy resources, mastery of production techniques, and the impact on the environment are major issues. The history of energy is linked to that of man. The determination to control it and understand it is one of the cornerstones of our civilization. 400,000 years ago, at the dawn of humanity, prehistoric man discovers it without knowing what it really is. It can take a number of forms. It has many faces. Muscular energy, either human or animal, to move around or carry things. Mechanical energy, which uses forces such as gravity. Thermal energy, which can turn fuel into heat. Hydraulic, which by channeling water, revolutionized transport and agriculture. Wind, which uses its power to turn windmills or drive ships. In the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution made it possible to understand a basic principle. All energy production is in fact a transformation. For example, coal contains energy. When you burn it, the energy escapes. This thermal energy heats water, which in turn becomes steam. This steam can then turn into mechanical energy by working pistons or into electrical energy using an alternator. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It is transferred. Like a mighty river, you can channel it, tame it, use it. But you can also lose control of it and then be flooded or drowned. In 1898, husband and wife scientists Pierre and Marie Curie discover radium, an element that glows in the dark and appears to produce infinite energy. Its potential is enormous. 1 gram of radium contains enough energy to turn a ton of water into steam. It is one of the earliest discoveries that will lead to the development of this energy that is both powerful and dangerous: nuclear energy.
Welcome to the memory of humanity. Here we can control time, analyze and compare billions of events, and alter them to rewrite history endlessly. For example, let's dive into the core of a nuclear reactor to understand how it works. A classic power plant works by burning a fuel, whereas a nuclear reactor draws its energies from atoms. When an atom is split, it releases an enormous amount of energy. Energy that will split other atoms in a chain reaction that can become a veritable bomb. Under control, it is a formidable source of energy. The nuclear plant turns all this energy into steam, which then works turbines to produce electricity. To work, a reactor needs a raw material, generally uranium. Purified and refined, these materials become tiny 10-gram pellets, each able to release the equivalent of a ton of coal. This combustible is placed in the core of the nuclear reactor, which is itself contained within a gas-tight vessel. The whole is insulated within a solid concrete structure known as the containment building. This is supposed to contain any potential leaks. Elements of vital importance, the control rods. In an emergency, these rods are thrust into the core of the reactor. Their mission? To stop the chain reaction. In theory, with all these safety measures, accidents cannot happen. However, the Chernobyl plant is rather unusual. It has no confinement enclosure, and there are no pressure sensors within the reactor core itself. If there's a problem, nobody really knows what's happening. The whole thing is monitored remotely from a control room, from which all orders are issued. A misreading or a poor decision taken in this room, and the reactor can dangerously overheat.
The Soviet Union, Ukraine, April 25, 1986. Lenin nuclear plant, 11 miles north of the city of Chernobyl. It's a special night in the plant. In the control room, everybody is at his post. Anatoly Dyatlov, assistant chief engineer, is supervising operations. For the first time, they're going to test the working of reactor number 4 in the case of a power cut. For the requirements of the test, the cooling alarm systems need to be disconnected and the power of the reactor reduced. 2310. The power of the reactor is reduced to 700 megawatts, as planned. The test can begin. midnight. Anatoly Dyatlov and his managers disagree on procedure. One of them gets an extremely important manipulation wrong. The reactor's control rods go in too deeply. The power then drops rapidly to 30 megawatts. 6 minutes later, the reactor dies. Its rate was far too low. Suddenly the pressure rises. Because there's no sensor, nobody in the control room is able to spot the danger. 38 minutes past midnight. The reactor is producing hardly any energy. Anatoly Dyatlov orders the control rods to be removed and to restart the reactor. This is directly against safety regulations. The team protests in vain, but obey orders. 42 minutes past midnight. The power of the reactor rises, but struggles to go above 200 megawatts. This is not enough. 1:03. Despite the malfunctions and against the advice of his team, Anatoly Dyatlov starts the test. At the same moment, within the core of the reactor, a hot point forms and concentrates. Nobody can see it. 1:21. The emergency system calls for the immediate shutdown of the reactor. 1:23 and 4 seconds. The test begins despite everything. At the same moment, a worker sees the lid of the reactor rising because of the pressure. 1:23 and 40 seconds. Foreman Akimov decides to trigger the emergency shutdown process himself and lowers the control rods. But the heat has distorted the guide tubes. The rods only go down 5 feet instead of 20. It's too late. 1:23 and 44 seconds, they hear the first explosions. The reactor core is out of control. Its power is multiplied by 100 in a few seconds. The bottom of the reactor explodes and turns into radioactive magma. A few seconds later, an enormous explosion sends the 1,400-ton lid hurtling into the air. Reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl plant has just exploded.
The price to pay. The Chernobyl disaster is classified as level 7 on the scale of nuclear accidents. The only other accident of equal gravity is that of Fukushima in Japan in 2011. It corresponds to a major accident followed by massive, long-lasting pollution, leading to serious consequences on public health. However, the history of civil nuclear power still includes nearly 30 accidents of lesser gravity, sometimes going as far as the fusion of the reactor core, as was the case at 3 Mile Island in the United States in 1979. So the danger is real. Accidents more numerous than one imagines. And yet, nuclear energy has no monopoly on pollution. Between gigantic oil spills and chemical plant explosions, the impact of human activity on the environment is greater and greater. The history of energy may be linked to that of man, but it's also linked to that of pollution. That is the price we pay for maintaining our way of life. Pollution is degrading a natural environment by introducing foreign materials in too large a quantity. On exploding, Reactor 4 hurls 50 tons of nuclear fuel into the atmosphere. The tragedy is only just beginning.
The Inferno. Flaming debris falls onto the plant, sparking some 30 fires. Radiation illuminates the sky with red and blue light. Deadly radioactive dust spreads everywhere. On the site of the explosion itself, at the core of the reactor, surviving workers try to save what they can. They evacuate the injured, cut power supplies, get the pumps working again. All of them will be immediately irradiated. In vain, because at this point, nobody is able to stop the chain reaction in Reactor 4. However, just next to it, Reactor 3 is still operating. The fire could eventually reach it. At 1:28, 4 minutes after the explosion, the first firefighters arrive on the scene. They have no protection against the radiation. Rapidly succumbing to nausea and vomiting, our frontline heroes battle hand-to-hand with the monster. Despite pouring tons of water onto the reactor, they cannot put out this invincible fire. However, the other seats of fire are progressively controlled. In the end, their sacrifice saves Reactor 3 and prevents a fresh explosion. Taken to the hospital at once, their skin turned black. They all die within a few weeks. For their sacrifice, they will receive the Order of Heroes of the Nation.
Save or perish. The word irradiation means the exposure, deliberately or accidentally, of a body to rays. In strong doses, irradiation burns the skin, destroys the nervous system, and causes multiple cancers. Actually, we are all permanently exposed, whether it's for a simple chest X-ray or during a flight in a plane. But fortunately, to infinitely tiny doses. At Chernobyl, personnel and firefighters were exposed to 30,000 times the fatal dose. Not everyone knows the risks associated with radioactivity, but one thing is sure. Once they were on the scene, despite vomiting and burns, they did their duty to the end. This sense of sacrifice, where the interests of others is important to the point of putting oneself in danger to save them, is to be found in a number of professions: firefighters, policemen, rescue workers, soldiers, but it can also manifest itself in any one of us in emergency situations. It has often happened that a great number of human beings only owe their survival to a tiny handful of people. The firefighters of Chernobyl sacrificed themselves to prevent the worst. But is all danger avoided?
Morning of April 26. Death is all around. Invisible. In the town of Pripyat, on the edge of the plant, 45,000 people begin their day as if nothing has happened. Without knowing it, they are swimming in an atmosphere saturated with deadly radiation. Plenty of rumors are circulating about a fire at the plant, but it can't be very serious because no alarm has been raised. Then, during the day, soldiers appear. A worrying aspect. They move around the town in protective equipment. At the beginning of the afternoon, the radiation norm has been exceeded by a wide margin, more than 15,000 times the acceptable dose. By evening, it is 600,000 times. 36 hours after the explosion, the evacuation finally begins. More than 1,000 buses head towards the town, the residents have 2 hours to pack. By the evening of April 27th, the town is cleared of its inhabitants. Only soldiers and scientists ordered to evaluate the accident remain. They all run a huge danger because the accident is far from over. The reactor core is still magma infusion. Temperature, 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit. Highly radioactive gases are leaking out. The radioactive cloud has already reached Sweden, and the international community is getting concerned by what is happening in the Soviet Union. By any means, they have to stop this radioactive hemorrhaging. So they improvise. In turn, hundreds of helicopters fly over the plant to drop bags of sand and lead into the gaping hole. In this way, 5,000 tons are poured in to limit the discharge. 600 pilots are irradiated. Except that this plug has an undesirable effect. It raises the heat in the reactor. At any moment, radioactive magma may break through the concrete slab and fall into the basements of the plant. And that would be an even more terrible disaster, because the basements are swimming in water. In particular, that poured in by the firefighters to extinguish the blaze. 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit of radioactive magma suddenly plunged into 20,000 tons of water. A thermonuclear bomb 80 times more powerful than that dropped on Hiroshima during the Second World War. The city of Kiev would be razed. All life would be destroyed within a radius of 200 miles. Only one solution to avoid the worst. Dive into the plant's basements, swim through a radioactive soup, find the drain sluices in the dark, and operate them manually. 3 of the plant's workers volunteer. Valery Bespalov, Alexei Ananenko, and Boris Baranov. The first 2 know exactly where the sluices are. The third accompanies them with a torch to guide them through the murky waters. They are fully aware of the risks. They remain in the gloom for an hour to accomplish their heroic task. They will die in the following weeks. May 6th, the core of the reactor in fusion finally falls through the slab. It reaches the basements of the plant. Fortunately, there is no longer any water to trigger an explosion.
We have just reached a turning point. A turning point is a key event, a crossroads in our history where the world swings one way or the other. Faced with the imminent danger of an apocalyptic nuclear explosion, 3 men volunteer. They know it's a suicide mission. What would have happened if nobody had gone to open the sluices? In the worst scenario, dozens of tons of radioactive magma at several thousand degrees would have come into contact with 20,000 cubic meters of water in a confined space. A gigantic pressure cooker, but without any safety valve. The explosion, estimated at 50 to 80 times that of Hiroshima, would certainly have razed the city of Kiev and exterminated all life within a radius of 200 miles. Moreover, it would have reduced all the forces responsible for fighting the accident to nothing. Nobody left to stop the flow of radiation. The contamination would have been cataclysmic, affecting the region's water reserves, contaminating the soil for centuries. Human life would no longer have been viable, except at the price of cancers and genetic deformity. Central Europe would have become a vast no man's land, a lost territory of desolate lands. Our world of today would have a radically different face.
The worst has been avoided, but the situation remains extremely grave. In a radius of 20 miles around the plant, the earth, the water, the plants, the animals, everything is polluted and highly radioactive. To clean up this vast zone, 600,000 men are employed to wash away the layer of dust, level houses, bury waste, slaughter animals. They call them the liquidators of Chernobyl, and they are fighting the invisible enemy. To prevent the radioactive magma from descending further and contaminating the groundwater, an access tunnel is dug. Objective: construct a new concrete slab underneath the reactor. 10,000 men work shifts night and day to dig this tunnel. Irradiated, a quarter of them will die before the age of 40. Cleaning the plant itself is extremely dangerous. The smallest debris is sufficiently radioactive to kill a man within an hour. So they send in remote-controlled robots. However, these break down because the radiation is too high. Only men can do what has to be done. Rotating every 45 seconds, equipped with simple lead protection. Those they will call the bio-robots fight at the risk of their lives to clear the debris. After these cleanup operations, a concrete sarcophagus can finally be built around reactor number 4. It is left to later generations to deal with the time bomb that is sealed within. In our time, a gigantic construction site is underway at Chernobyl. To renew the confinement to the reactor, they are building a formidable arch consisting of 30,000 tons of steel and standing 100 meters high. Lifespan of this new protection? Around 100 years. And then? But that is another story.
Life always finds a way. The Chernobyl region was cleaned up over a radius of 20 miles from the plant, then closed and fenced off. Today, it is simply known by the name Zone. Signs prohibit access and warn of the danger of radioactivity. The Chernobyl disaster was devastating for the human populations, but also for the local wildlife. Animals that were not killed by the radiation were slaughtered by the liquidators. For a long time, it was thought that this zone was lost for centuries. Everything appeared dead, frozen in time. But, as always, life evolved and adapted. Certain animals, better protected against radiation than others, survived and have reproduced. Today, species that are unique in the world have appeared in this zone, abandoned by man, sometimes with deformities or strange colors of fur. But life is well and truly there, and, in the end, the biodiversity can be compared to that of a nature reserve. Billions of years ago, life conquered the then sterile Earth. It has resisted bombardment by meteorites, ice ages, and major extinctions. However, despite all these assaults, little by little, life has always got the upper hand, whatever its form, however much time it took. Life is not fragile, it is tenacious. It was here before man and will be here after him. The only fragile thing is us. The only thing in danger is our environment. The very thing that allows the human species to exist